Hello viewers, I'm Ron Grant coming to you live and direct from Tortola in the Virgin Islands. You're watching 284 Media. Thank you so much for your time. Of course, a happy Thursday's wish to everyone. As you all know, we are of course observing BVI Finance Week. I'm honored today to be joined by the CEO of BVI Finance, Ms. Elise Donovan, alongside Mr. Mark Pragnell, who's the Director of Pragmatic Advisory. We're discussing, of course, not only the week of activities beyond globalization, which is the theme, the British Virgin Islands' contribution to global prosperity in an uncertain world. Of course, we are literally dissecting, and I have the honor of dissecting the summary report, which is a report of BVI Finance. We'll be right back after a quick commercial break.
Introducing a show poised to help guide modern-day men into 21st century distinguished gentlemen. It doesn't always involve suits and bow ties, but raw, real-life lessons. I'm taking you outside in the field to share the journey of some of the BVI's the best and brightest men. From East End to West End, Virgin Gorda to Jos Van Dyke, not forgetting Anegada. Our Virgin Islands gentlemen are doing the damn thing. We are the movers and shakers of this generation. The Art of a Distinguished Gentleman. Season 4 by yours truly, Ron Grant. Raising a Generation of Greatness. Wednesdays at 8 p.m. on 284 Media.
Viewers, welcome back and thank you so much for sticking with us. As promised, I am joined by Ms. Elise Donovan, CEO of BVI Finance, alongside Mr. Mark Pragnell, the Director of Pragmatic Advisory. I want to thank you so much for your presence here today. Pleasant day to you and welcome to our studios.
Delighted to be here.
Thank you very much, Ron, for having
Absolutely.
us
The
here.
pleasure is all mine. All things BVI Finance, of course, Financial Services Week particularly, we've been looking all week at engaging the public and making sure that they are as aware as possible as to the happenings of one of our key economic pillars here in the territory. We're going to get into quite a bit, but of course I have to ask you the theme, Ms. Donovan, beyond globalization. What does that mean for us at this present stage?
Well, Financial Services Week 2020, we are focusing on globalization generally, and our theme for Financial Services Week is Globalization, BVI, Beyond. And we're looking at what's happening in the global economy, what's happening with globalization, and looking at the key role that BVI as an international business and finance center is playing in the global economy. As you know, one of the primary things that we do as an international finance center is that we facilitate the wheels that keep the global economy turning. We provide the products and services that help globalization to churn.
Understood. Now, I have to ask you, Ms. Donovan, at this very critical juncture, not only in the history of the Virgin Islands, of course, there are a lot of aspects that would seemingly threaten the industry. I want to ask particularly to residents within the Virgin Islands, what would you say from your seat we need to be paying more attention to when it comes to the financial services industry?
Well, one of the most important things is that why we have commissioned this report is we want to have current, accurate and comprehensive information about what is happening in the global economy and how the BVI can position itself to respond and take advantage of the opportunities that are happening in the global economy. As you know, the world is in sort of what has been defined as a polycrisis.
Correct.
We're facing inflation, we're facing war, we are facing post-pandemic, we're facing climate change issues.
Yes.
So there's a plethora of issues in the global economy that requires the response. And right now, COP 2027 is taking place in Egypt, and BVI is around that table.
Yes.
We have the minister for that subject is there. But as our premier said in our conference on Tuesday, that it's important for all of us as a global community to be involved in global issues. And BVI is even more keen because the issues affect us acutely. And so we ought to be in a position where we understand what the issues are and how we respond. So we commissioned this report from Pragmatics Advisory.
Yes.
And Mark Pragnell. He's going to be telling us a little bit more about the report, but essentially it looks at beyond globalization, the BVI's contribution to prosperity in an uncertain world. So how does the BVI assess what is happening, and how can we respond? How can we be proactively taking a stance on how we are going to position ourselves to take advantage of the opportunities that are evolving?
Understood. Now, before we get into the report, I have to ask you, what has the response been like from stakeholders and community members throughout the Financial Services Week of Engagement? What has that response been like?
Well, we started off, with you always have to start out stretching.
Yes.
So we started out with a hike on Saturday.
Okay.
So that was very well attended, and it was a great hike. And the participants got to learn a little bit about the trees and
Okay.
the vegetation and so forth as we climbed the hills, and so that was very interesting. And then on Tuesday we got into some very serious issues.
Of
We had
course.
our Beyond Globalization conference where we presented the report, and we had a series of panel discussions discussing the issues that were brought out in the report, and it's
Okay.
been very responsive. And then in the evening we had the great debate between the students of the H. Lavely Stout
That was
Community
exciting.
College as well as the seasoned industry practitioners. And as you know, the students were able to win the debate
Yes, they
on
did.
does globalization have a future. So that was very interesting. And then yesterday morning we had a special edition breakfast forum where we looked at the intersection of business, financial services, and tourism. And we had the director of tourism, we had the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce, and we also had myself as CEO being interviewed or moderated by the director of communications, and Mark Pragnell, of course, was there to talk about the report. So it is good to see the engagement and the community involvement in the
Yes,
issues,
very
and
important.
that we are also going tomorrow. We're going to the secondary schools, and we'll have practitioners presenting at the various secondary school about our financial services industry. So we've been
Busy.
very much busy this
Understood.
week, and keeping the community involved and informed about where we are as an international business and finance center.
Incredible. Mr. Pragnell, as mentioned, your pragmatic advisory was contracted, was deemed to present this report, and we're going to dissect the report, really talk about some of the key findings of that after a quick commercial break. We'll be right back.
Is business slow, cash flow down, hosting an upcoming event? We can help. Advertise with 284 Media and take your business or event to the next level by enhancing your present marketing and messaging strategies. Allow our team of experts to create a personalized ad that sets your business apart from all the rest. This could be your business or event. So, what are you waiting for? Contact our marketing team at 284media@cctbvi.com. Advertising with us works.
So you're saying I can ask this cat any question?
The cat is connected to the computer. You just type in the question, it will read his mind. There the answer comes.
You're the man! I've been looking for this for weeks.
Viewers, welcome back, and thank you so much for sticking with us. Now, Mr. Pragnell, I have to get into the report, quite a detailed report. I want to discuss some of the key findings from your agency.
I'm delighted to be here and quiz ahead.
Absolutely. So what were some of the key findings upon completion of the report?
I think the report covers a very wide range of topics, and I think my starting point will be not about the future, not about where the BVI is going, but actually what this report does do is it actually highlights how far the BVI has come as well.
Okay.
And I think what I walk away with, having done this research, is actually BVI Islanders ought to be incredibly proud of the progress that's been made in terms of developing not just an international finance centre, but actually what is a balanced and robust and importantly resilient economy in these islands. So if I talk a little bit about, for example, the contribution that what we call actually the International Business and Finance Centre does, we think about what its role is internationally. Well, it feels very odd to think about it, but those BVI business companies, which are administered and registered and
Yes.
active here in Roadtown, what they're doing is they're helping to facilitate cross-border investment and cross-border trade across the world. And that's right across the world. And one of the things that's really important about us, is we found out through our survey of the industry, is that this is a jurisdiction with truly global reach.
Okay.
But importantly, and this is what can often get lost in the debate, this isn't about moving pieces of paper around or even moving money around. This is about actually ensuring that there is investment going to where the investment is most needed and best deployed across the world. That's what this jurisdiction does. That's what the Finance Centre does, is it makes sure that investment is best optimised across the world. And we estimate that there's probably something like $1.4 trillion worth of assets held within the different BVI BCs that are held on these islands. Now that is a very large number, and it sounds a little bit surreal. But trying to put some context to that sort of level of investment, that 1.4 trillion, probably is supporting 2.3 million jobs worldwide. So it's not just about moving paper around, it's not just about pushing money around. What it is, it's putting investment into real places, into real assets, and supporting real jobs, and those jobs are global.
Understood.
So at the first point there, really major contribution that this jurisdiction makes to the global economy. But also importantly, a major contribution that the finance sector makes to this jurisdiction as well. And the extent to which actually we've got about a fifth of jobs on the islands dependent on the IFC. We've got around about just over half of economic activity dependent on the IFC, and a very large chunk of government revenues and therefore public services dependent on the IFC. But my final observation about where we are now, and it's important, is that we've got to remember that the British Virgin Islands is still a small economy. It's only 3,000, and all too often people from abroad will look at the statistics from here and compare it with big nations, which is completely incorrect to do.
Correct.
So what we've done is we've compared these islands with similar scale small island economies. And when you do that, when you make a fair comparison, what you find is that this is a remarkably balanced economy. You've got both tourism and the finance centre, as well as a robust series of other auxiliary industries as well. And with that, these islands have demonstrated that their economy is robust and importantly resilient. So for me, one of the biggest takeaways from this is not about the future, although we'll discuss that in a moment, but is actually about where you are now, which is a remarkably balanced and robust economy for an island state of its size.
Mr. Pragnell, speaking of the resilience of not only the industry, I have to ask you, based on your research, and I'm happy that you mentioned the accurate and fair comparison with other countries that are within the same level, but what would you, in your professional expertise, deem that level of resistance with the success of the industry? Where does that come from, and what do you think is to be thanked for that?
I think there are lots of reasons for that, and Elise can explain in more detail than I can, but for the industry itself has resilience plans, and it's a part of doing business, and a vital and essential and required part of doing business that the sector has, that the sector works out. Each business works out what they can do in case of a problem. Okay?
Understood.
But I think it's deeper than that. I think there is something about a small island state that means that everyone mucks in and gets on with it and sorts things out. And clearly, that happened post Hurricane Irma. But I think I've said this before. I think an element of that, and I live and work in the United Kingdom. It's a somewhat bigger island, certainly population-wise.
Of course.
I've done work with a large number of other small IFCs as well. When I land here, what is after quite a long journey, it has to be said, but when I land here after, there is something that really does come through strongly about these islands, and the various things that Elise has taken me to as part of the events for this week really demonstrate that, especially the debate on Tuesday evening, is that I find here is that there's an incredibly strong sense of community. And I think with that sense of community also comes resilience.
Understood. Thank you so much for that, and of course, once again, your very detailed report. Ms. Donovan, I have to ask you, having been at the helm of BVI Finance, having represented the territory on a global platform, and really seeing it through its highs and lows, from your seat, what would you say has contributed to some of that resilience that we're now experiencing with the longevity, more so, of the industry?
I would say, as you probably heard me say before, I think resilience is part and parcel of the DNA of the British Virgin Islands, in many respects, not just in our financial services industry, but I think across the whole community and how we come together as a population. We have, I think, we're a microcosm of the globe. We have many countries represented here in this small population, in this small island. And one of the things that makes us interesting is that we've always punched above our weight. We don't aim for just, being a regional center or local center. We aim as a global center. And I think having business continuity plans, as Mark said, resilience is part of the mandate, I think, from the regulators. Having business continuity plans for the financial services industry has allowed us to step in when, Hurricane Irma and Maria happened, and the aftermath, and our financial services industry was up and running within days, as well as during COVID. We never stopped. So we had the blueprint from Irma that we were able to use again and move into digital strategies, digital marketing, digital webinars, digital engagement with our clients. And we have certainly seen the acceleration of the digital economy. 40%, I think, during COVID has grown, and BVI is a part of that story. It's part of that. But I think for me, the most interesting part coming out of the report is looking at the spread, the global spread of BVI, a business, and where our clients are placed. So we have clients across the globe. And so when you compare us with other financial centers, I think that's one of the things that we can boast, is that we are truly a global international business and finance center. We have markets in every region. We have 20% of our market comes from Latin America.
Okay.
We have 13% from Asia, and specifically 44% from China. So comparatively, collectively, you have 57% of our business coming from China and the Asia Pacific region. We also have another 12% coming from Europe. And when you take out the EU, that's 7% from the EU, and then we have 5% from EU Europe, and that includes the UK and the Channel Islands.
Okay.
And then we have about 4% for Russia and Central Asia, and then we have about 3% from Africa. So when you look at that pie chart of where BVI clients are placed across the globe, it truly makes us stand out and say, we are significant, and we should be proud of the accomplishments of this jurisdiction. As small as we are, we do punch above our weight.
I could not agree with you more. I have to ask you, what were some of your major takeaways from this report that you would specifically like the general public to pay attention to?
As Mark said, that we are a very balanced economy, and financial services continues to make significant contributions to part of the economy. But we are not alone in terms of our contribution. Yesterday, we had the special breakfast forum with both the business community as well as tourism. And we showed that symbiotic relationship that we have. And so we all rely on each other. So when we are bringing our business here, we expect to have a certain level of tourism and a certain level of services which are provided by the business community. So I think the takeaway is that we have to work together, and it also has to be a public-private partnership.
Correct.
On Monday, Mark actually presented before an informal sitting of the House of Assembly, and the same emphasis that they have placed in terms of the questions that they have and what BVI needs to do is the same questions we heard from the industry and the private sector on Tuesday. So there's an alignment between the public sector and the policy makers particularly, and there's an alignment with the private sector and what they feel is important. So having that public-private partnership and taking it forward, and to know that all the things that we have to do to make ourselves attractive as a jurisdiction, that we align as a public and private sector, and that we are going to get those things done.
And of course, most importantly, like you mentioned, we're all on the same page. When we look at the report, the findings, what's next in making sure that we continue to hold our position on the global market? What's next for the territory?
Well, there are three scenarios which Mark they presented in the report. So I'd like him to outline those scenarios and then say how we are going to respond to those scenarios.
Yeah, I think the important thing to say is that the world is always changing.
Correct.
The BVI as an international business and finance centre has grown on the back of globalisation over the last 2 decades. But there are some quite serious changes ahead and some things that we've seen change already. So we had obviously the financial crisis back in 2007-8, new technologies changing everything. The growth of China has been quite significant. And we've had the pandemic, and we've even got war in Europe now. So the world looks a very different place, and I think we can't sit back and assume things will carry on as they were. So as part of this project, what we've tried to do is think about how the world might change moving forward, and frankly we don't know is the answer. So what we've done is we've specified 3 different scenarios. And our first scenario is what we call weaker internationalism, and that's where things carry on as they in the same sort of direction as they have previously, so further freer trade, more political integration in certain areas, but the geopolitics carry on at a slower pace.
Okay.
I certainly don't see the world growing economically as fast as it has done for the last 2 decades. This jurisdiction and everywhere else has got to get used to slower growth globally. So that's our first scenario. Our second scenario we call the block economy, and that's where the world starts to break up into large blocks, where each of those blocks, such as the European Union, become more integrated, trade more with each other, but they start to get further apart from other blocks. Maybe China and some of Asia, maybe China by itself, maybe, who knows, possibly North America will start to diverge somewhat from what's happening in Europe as well, for example. Okay. And our third scenario is what we call the new economic nationalism. And that's picking up on the sort of trends we've had of populism, Trump-esque type behaviour. And there, actually, states start to say, well, you know what, we'll go our own way. We want to look after ourselves before we trade with others, and they start to diverge. Now, I think that's the least likely scenario, but you can see all of those 3 scenarios being plausible, potentially plausible moving forward. So we've played those out and written about those and thought what those might mean. They all mean a slower global economy, but also they all mean, interestingly, they all mean different things for international finance centres, and they all provide different challenges, but also different opportunities for the British Virgin Islands as well. So in a world where weaker internationalism occurs, it looks like possibly the BVI can sort of carry on as it is at the moment as a finance centre. Okay. But it's got to get sharper because the competition's going to be tighter, because things are going to be a little bit more competitive because the world's growing slower and everyone else is after a bit of the action. In a block economy, actually the rules change quite a bit. And at the moment, the BVI is benefits from being able to, and does, access lots of markets across the world simultaneously. The question has to be, how can it continue to do that if the world starts to break into blocks? And that's going to require agility from government, and it's going to require agility from the industry here, and then working together in order to work out how to deal with that changing environment. Interestingly, I think, with the third scenario, if the world starts to fragment into this new economic nationalism where countries go their own ways, That's going to be awful for the global economy. It's going to be costly. There's going to be much more friction between nations. Global economy will start to go will slow dramatically. But actually, it will make the job of doing things cross-border, which people will still want to do, businesses will still want to do, it'll make it tougher. And probably they will provide more of a role for jurisdictions and expertise that we have, like the BVI.
Understood.
In order to facilitate the tougher trading environment that you would have in that slightly more dysfunctional world.
Okay, well said. And you mentioned we really don't know exactly what direction that will take, but either direction, we want to make sure that we're as prepared as possible. And your thoughts, Ms. Donovan?
Yes, based on what Mark said, there are also opportunities that have come out in the report where we look at things like technology and how can we improve on technology, how can we build in this new evolving part of globalization, which is the digital asset space. How can we grow that sector in the BVI? And then there's things like environment, social governance, the ESG and the green finance. And there are opportunities where we can position the BVI. We are not just a beneficiary of all that is happening in the globe and a victim of, climate change.
Likewise,
but
yes.
we can also be a beneficiary, it's what I meant to say. We can also be a beneficiary of ensuring that we are including ESG strategies in terms of how we move forward as an international business and finance center. And then when we look at the cross-border activity that's going to happen as a result of the various scenarios that Mark has pointed out, how do we put BVI up the value chain? How do we grow, the activities that we are providing or the services that we are providing? How do we add value in this jurisdiction to those services? So we're not just incorporating a company and having it as holding, but we're going straight up the value chain and we're having listcos. We're doing very complex structures and complex transactions. As you see, we send out on a weekly basis.
Yes.
How can we be doing more of that, more of the cross-border activity? How do we get more engaged in that? So I think there are opportunities, and it's what we need to do to make sure that we avail ourselves of those opportunities.
And definitely availing ourselves. I do think that we have what it takes as a nation, as a country, to be able to continue to compete on a global market. I want to thank you both so much for your time and putting into perspective this report, and of course bringing it to the public. Ms. Donovan, correct me if I'm wrong. Is this report available for the public, or is it not as yet?
Right now, the summary report,
just the summary, that's correct,
report, yes. Which is what you have in hand, that is available to the public. But the 250-page, very comprehensive, very detailed report, which we encourage everybody to have access to and to really get aware of how we are in terms of. I think the report has, to me, three primary books in it. One is on globalization. One is on the global economy, and the next book is on the BVI economy, and how we are as a really sound jurisdiction, sound jurisdiction in our economy. And then the third chapter, or the third book, I would say, looks at how we can place ourselves in these three scenarios and how we're going to avail ourselves of the opportunities that evolve. So the messages that are primary, and I think the main thing that we want people to understand is BVI is a global international business and finance center. That is the term that Mark uses in the report to describe our financial services industry because of the activity that takes place. And when you look at the foreign direct investment flows, inward and outward, BVI is highly placed. I think we're 13th largest country for foreign direct investment outward flows, and I think 8th for inward direct investment flows. So BVI is right up there as far as the global economy is concerned. And so we should be proud and recognize that this is something that everybody should be aware of and get involved and know the business that we do here in this small jurisdiction.
Very important. Viewers, you heard it here first, of course, the British Virgin Islands contribution to a global prosperity in a very uncertain world. There are a lot of challenges, but we continue to navigate that trajectory and make sure that we are poised here in the territory to continue to support our financial services industry. Ms. Donovan and Mr. Pragnell, thank you so much for coming to our studios. Thank you so much for really hosting and leading a very successful financial services week. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Ron. We
You're
really
welcome.
appreciate it.
Absolutely. Viewers, that's all the time we have. Do have a beautiful rest of the day. I'm Ron Grant. Bye-bye.